What if everything you thought you knew about wrestling's most powerful couple was built on a lie that started before the cameras ever turned on? Stephanie McMahon once sat in front of camera and admitted something she had never spoken about publicly. She said she almost lost a man she loved, and that a part of her always knew it might happen. She said it quietly, almost like a confession she had been carrying for years. I almost lost Paul, my husband, and what's strange is I always had this feeling I was going to lose him early. Now, for the first time, the layers behind that fear being peeled back, and the story that sits underneath is nothing like what the headline sold you. Because the truth about Stephanie McMahon and Triple H doesn't start with a love story. It starts with betrayal, a scripted wedding, and a father who looked at his own daughter's marriage and saw dollar signs. If this is the kind of deep dive you live for, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your take, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Now let's get into it. Picture this. It is November 29th, 1999. Monday Night Raw is live. Stephanie McMahon is standing in a wedding dress in the middle of the ring, about to marry a wrestler named Test. The entire arena is watching. The story was written by the company, and her own father Vince was the architect behind it. The crowd was invested. The drama was peaking. And then the music hit. Triple H walked out and stopped the wedding before a single vow could be finished. He grabbed a microphone and told the world something that made every jaw in the building drop. He said he had already married Stephanie in a Las Vegas drive-through chapel while she was unconscious. He played a videotape to prove it. The arena exploded. That on-screen marriage was scripted as an act of revenge against Vince, and it launched what fans now call the McMahon-Helmsley era. The line Triple H threw at Vince that night became one of the most replayed moments in company history. He looked his boss dead in the eye and asked, "The question is not whether we did, but how many times did we consummate the marriage?" The crowd lost its collective mind. A few weeks later at Armageddon in December 1999, the storyline took its next sharp turn. Vince stepped into a no-holds-barred match against Triple H, and the entire show was sold on the image of a father fighting the man who had stolen his daughter. By the end of the night, the real twist landed. Stephanie turned on her own father. She aligned herself with Triple H. The two of them stood over Vince together, and the balance of power shifted completely. From that point forward, the McMahon-Helmsley regime ran the show as on-screen authority figures. They played the villains. They handed titles to each other like they were party favors. Stephanie captured the women's championship with help from her scripted husband, and the two of them controlled the creative direction of both brands at the same time. This was the peak of the Attitude Era, and the McMahon family drama was the engine driving it all. Stephanie has always been honest about the fact that the hateful, scheming character fans loathed every week was a performance. Years later, she explained the distance between the woman on screen and the woman behind it. She said she plays a villain to set the stage, and when pressed on whether she was actually a villain in real life, she laughed and said she hoped not, because her character was genuinely hateful. That scripted marriage was supposed to be the same kind of fiction, a story engineered to draw heat and sell tickets. But here is where everything changed. The story did not stay a story. While the cameras captured a fake marriage, the two people inside it started falling for each other in real life. Around the year 2000, almost nobody knew. Stephanie was the boss's daughter. Triple H was one of the top stars in the company. The man who signed his paychecks was also the father of the woman he was quietly falling for, and that man had built an empire on knowing every single thing that happened inside his walls. When Vince found out, he did not throw a celebration. He told them to stop. He pointed to company policy and to the simple fact that Stephanie was his daughter. The two of them tried to obey. They pulled back from each other and stayed apart for close to 10 months before the pull became too strong, and they came back together. Vince eventually stopped fighting it. On October 25th, 2003, Stephanie McMahon and Paul Levesque got married for real. The ceremony took place at St. Teresa of Avila Church in Sleepy Hollow, New York. The guest list was packed with wrestling royalty. There were no cameras inside, because this time it was not a show. So the real question here is not whether their story is dramatic. It obviously is. The question is what Vince actually did. what he secretly wanted, and what he later admitted about turning his own daughter's love life into one of the biggest storylines the business has ever seen. And to answer that, we have to rewind and understand exactly who these two people were before any of this started. Two people who grew up inside the business. Before he was Triple H, he was Paul Michael Levesque, born on July 27, 1969, in Nashua, New Hampshire. He discovered bodybuilding as a teenager and won a state title before he turned 20. He trained under the legendary Killer Kowalski and made his debut in 1992. He had a brief run in WCW under the name Jean-Paul Levesque, then joined the company in 1995 as a snobbish blue blood character called Hunter Hearst Helmsley. That character was a slow burn, but the man behind it was razor sharp. He worked his way into a tight-knit backstage faction known as the Clique, alongside Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Sean Waltman. He absorbed the politics of the locker room as quickly as he absorbed the craft of the ring. Over time, the stuffy aristocrat melted away, and what emerged was the cold, calculating Triple H, the man fans would eventually call the cerebral assassin. But the thing that truly launched Triple H to the top was not just his promo work or his championship runs. It was the woman standing beside him. Her name was Joni Laura, and the world knew her as Chyna. She was unlike anything fans had ever seen. A powerful, muscular woman who wrestled men, held the Intercontinental Championship, and smashed through doors that had been bolted shut to female performers for decades. She was also Triple H's real-life girlfriend. Longtime writer Vince Russo has spoken many times about how Chyna ended up in the company in the first place. In his telling, Triple H pushed for her himself. Russo also pointed to a quality that made her impossible to ignore. He said she had what insiders call the it factor, that rare thing that makes a crowd lock in the second a person walks through the curtain. He has said that no other wrestler had a partner like her at the time, and that Triple H was smart enough to understand exactly what he had. Then the scripted Stephanie storyline arrived, and the timing of it matters more than anything. The real-life relationship between Triple H and Chyna fell apart at almost the exact same moment the on-screen romance with Stephanie began. To a large section of the audience, that timing did not look like a coincidence. It looked like a betrayal. For years, fans have viewed Stephanie as the woman who broke up that couple, and Triple H as the man who walked away from his partner for the boss's daughter. Chyna spoke about that period in later interviews, and her version of events was devastating. She described being treated differently at work, feeling like everyone around her knew something she did not. She recalled asking Triple H directly whether there was something real developing between him and Stephanie. She said he denied it, turned the question back on her, and left her convinced for a while that she was the one with the problem. She also described the day the wondering stopped and the knowing began. She said she found a love letter from Stephanie in his Halliburton briefcase after picking the lock one day. After that, she said, the relationship and her time in the company were both finished. She was let go. She stayed silent and carried that story with her for the rest of her life. The accusations grew darker in the years that followed. In interviews late in her life, including conversations with Vince Russo, Chyna claimed that Triple H had been physically violent toward her near the end of their relationship. Triple H pushed back forcefully. He called the statements a complete fabrication and described the allegations as reckless. His friend Sean Waltman publicly stood by him. The two sides never agreed, and they never will, because this story does not have a clean ending. Chyna struggled after leaving the business. She faced financial problems and personal battles, and she passed away in 2016. Russo has argued that one small act of kindness in the company could have altered her final days. He has said she reached out shortly before her death and was ignored. He described it, in his own words, as the difference between life and death. It is a heavy chapter, and it sits underneath everything that came after, because while Chyna's story was ending, Stephanie's was just beginning. And the two people at the center of the new romance still had to hide it from the one man who controlled both of their careers, the secret that lived right under Vince's nose. Stephanie Marie McMahon was born on September 24th, 1976, in Hartford, Connecticut, to Vince and Linda McMahon. She did not stumble into wrestling. She was born inside it. She started working for the family business at 13 years old, modeling merchandise for the company catalog. She grew up watching booking meetings happen beside the pool at her parents' house. By the time she graduated from Boston University in 1998, she already understood the company in a way that very few outsiders ever could. That upbringing is the key to understanding how the secret stayed hidden. Stephanie and Triple H spent enormous amounts of time together once the McMahon-Helmsley angle took over the show. Their story ran through every single episode, and they had to build their characters side by side. He took the time to teach her the business, and she absorbed everything he said. They were constantly around each other, and at some point the working partnership crossed a line neither of them had planned. The funny part is that the people around them noticed it before they did. Stephanie has told the story of the night. They filmed the fake Las Vegas wedding. Her real best friend Mandy was sitting beside her, and when Triple H walked into the room, Mandy read Stephanie's face in an instant. She told her flat out that she liked him. Stephanie denied it and insisted they were just doing a storyline. Both of their mothers saw it too. Stephanie has shared the blunt thing her own mother said when she tried to wave the whole thing off. Her mother told her she was not that good of an actress and that she could see right through it. Triple H got the same message from his own mother, who told him there was clearly more happening than what was on television. Stephanie has pointed to one small moment that night as the real beginning. It was cold outside, and Triple H offered her his jacket. She accepted it, and she has said she remembered how it smelled. From there, she has said, the real thing took off even before either of them admitted what it was. But admitting it to themselves was nothing compared to admitting it to Vince. He was the chairman of the company, the writer of the show, and the father of the woman involved. When he learned the truth, he did not celebrate. He had a rule about mixing his family with his talent, and at first he treated this like any other business problem to be solved. He told them it would not work. He told them they could not do this. They listened, at least for a while. The two of them pulled back and tried to give Vince what he wanted. Triple H later wrote about that stretch in his book and admitted the plan collapsed. In his words, they tried to adhere to Vince's wishes and cool off, but after a while it just did not work. They stayed apart for roughly 10 months. Then they came back together, because the feeling never left, and eventually Vince stopped fighting it. There's a strange tension running through all of this that fans still debate. Stephanie was building one of the most despised characters on television at the very same time her real heart was somewhere entirely different. The woman who slapped wrestlers across the face and abused her power every week was, off camera, falling in love and hiding it from her father. The performer and the person were moving in opposite directions, and only a small handful of people knew the truth. On Valentine's Day 2003, Triple H proposed, and the secret finally became a future. The relationship that began as a worked angle had survived a public breakup, a forced separation, and the disapproval of the most powerful man in the business. The two of them had earned their wedding day. What they did not fully control was how that wedding day would be planned, because Vince McMahon was about to insert himself one more time, and his idea of a wedding gift was unlike anything a normal father would suggest. The father who wanted to sell the wedding. By 2003, Stephanie and Triple H were ready to get married for real, in private, away from the cameras. Vince McMahon looked at that plan and saw something completely different. He saw a buy rate. The most revealing account of this came years later, when Triple H spoke about it directly. Vince seriously suggested holding the real wedding live on pay-per-view. According to Triple H, Vince pitched it the same way he would pitch any main event. The reported line captures exactly how his mind operated. He said something close to, what if Stephanie and Paul's wedding was live on pay-per-view? People would buy that. It would be awesome. To Vince, his only daughter's wedding was a piece of content that could generate revenue. Stephanie said no. She wanted one day that belonged to her family, and not to the audience. And here's a detail that tells you everything about the man. When she refused, Vince reportedly called her selfish for it. In his world, keeping a wedding private instead of selling it was a strange choice. The normal choice was to put it on the card. That was not the only way the business invaded the marriage. 6 days before the real ceremony, Vince booked himself against his own daughter in a brutal street fight at No Mercy in October 2003. He was about to walk her down the aisle, and first he wanted to beat her up on national television. The story goes that Linda McMahon stepped in with a warning of her own. Linda reportedly threatened to divorce Vince on the spot if Stephanie showed up to her wedding with black eye or a visible injury. Stephanie got choked out in the match, but she made it to the church without a mark on her face. Stop and think about what that means. Days before her daughter's wedding. The father is planning the safest way to physically dominate her on a wrestling show, and the mother has to threaten to end her own marriage just to keep a bride from walking down the aisle bruised. That is not a normal family negotiation. That is a McMahon family where the lines between the business and the bloodline stopped existing a long time ago. Stephanie has spoken about growing up inside that world and how nothing about it felt unusual to her at the time. The booking meetings at the house, the wrestlers showing up at the